All right, our guest today, business coach, keynote speaker. Check out his new book, From Suck to Success. Everybody, please welcome Todd Palmer. Todd,
Hey,
how you doing today?
it's the Bennett family. This is awesome. I've never been on a father-son podcast before to talk about From Suck to Success, Chapter 8, all about Nigel J. Bennett taking the leap forward, people. I am reverse engineering the process. We're here to talk about Nigel, not talk about me. But if you want to learn more about Nigel, in Chapter 8 of my #1 best-selling book,
Oh God.
how is that for a shameless plug?
Is that the chapter? Is that the chapter when we were in prison together? You know, because I don't think we were going to talk about that.
Well, but there's no pictures. It's all just stories. It's all just stories. Guys, I am thrilled to
so
be here.
funny.
This is a great way for me to start my week.
Oh man, actually, yeah, seriously, Todd and I were in prison together in Northern California a couple of years ago, right?
For 3 days, teaching entrepreneurship to the people who were legally obligated to be there. We volunteered. Let's be clear about this.
Thank you for clearing that one up. Yeah.
And Devin's like, good luck. The train is off the tracks. Oh yeah.
No, we're right. We're going right on time.
I'll tell you what, Nigel. I was just did a program for EO Bryan College Station down in Texas, and I talked a lot about the Hustle 2.0 people and how and you remember these stories about these people who are incarcerated.
I know.
Just basically, the step to the line exercise is never going to escape me. Where they're sharing their life stories, we're sharing our life stories by this simple exercise, and then just one little fork in the road put a lot of them on one path, put a lot of us on a different path. But we are all the same in many respects.
That exercise shook me to my core. I don't think I've tried to hold back tears that hard for such we had to stand on these lines facing these incarcerated men, and there were 90 of them in the room. So a line went all the way down the room, and we had our volunteers on one side of a line, and they were staring. You had to stare them in the eyes, remember? Yeah. And then the facilitator said, "How many of you have heard gunshots at night when you're a child?" And stay on the line. Those that you haven't, step back. So I stepped back. The guy I was staring in the eyes stayed there.
Yep.
How many of you have had a sibling or a parent murdered? I stepped back. They stayed there. Now I'm starting to shake, right? I'm starting to shake. How many of you were arrested by the age of 10? I stepped back. I was brought home by the police just because I was goofing around, but they stayed there. Then the next question just shook me. It was like, how many of you are incarcerated here for, 5 years, 10 years? And it was like 18, 20 years, whatever. I'm still staring at the guy, and now I'm starting to cry. Like my tears are coming down my face, and I'm really starting to shake. And I'm quite far back now because I stepped back, but I'm still staring him in the eyes because you can't break eye contact. The last question just went right through to me. How many of you have been in solitary confinement for more than a year? He stayed there 2 years, 3 years. And I was like, what is going on? Like these guys are treated like rats. It was, and like you said, it's just that little fork in the road. It could have been any one of us that was born into whatever they were born into. And it was absolutely shocking. And I was just shaking like a babbling mess. And then at the end, the exercise was over, and we stepped forward, and we were allowed to hug, and we hugged, and I was hugging this gentleman and just shaking like a baby. I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
Well,
thanks for reminding me.
Do you remember the question she asked, Kat Hoke, who's an amazing facilitator, and her book's phenomenal. You guys should, if you haven't got her on, get her on. She's just, her story's so powerful.
Yeah.
But the question she asked is, how many of you grew up in a home with 5 or less books, 4 or less books? And all the volunteers are on the line. We all had books in our home. 9 out of 10 of the people across from us never even had the opportunity to see a different world through the power of reading. And that really floored me, because and then she talks about it being a second chance program, which makes sense. I argue, though, that a lot of them, by having limited access for whatever reason, knowledge, to opportunity, to vision, do they ever even get a first chance?
Yeah, I know. Wow. Yeah, you were cutting in just a little bit there, Todd, for a second, but I think it's okay. Yeah. I know they just didn't have a chance. And, the stories were, but I mean, we could do a whole podcast, a whole talk on that. It was just, it was totally life-changing for myself and Reiko. My wife came with me, and yeah, it was incredible. Man. So actually, what I like to do is we do a little thing called Two Truths and a Lie at this point of our show. So let's see if this actually flows into this after this prison chat here, because it's pretty heavy. So we got two truths and a lie here. So I'm going to read these out, and Devin and I are going to guess which one is the lie, right? Okay, so the first one I've got here is I was named one of Detroit's most eligible bachelors in the early 2000s. Holy crow.
Nice.
Is that when everybody left Detroit? There was a time when everybody left Detroit. Maybe there's just nobody left. I don't know. Except for Todd. Okay. I played football in high school. It's number 2. Okay. And I was in prison with Nigel in Northern California. Well, I know that one's true. And I got another one thrown in here. Todd brought baseball to a small African nation.
Damn. Oh man, that's I'm stumped. A little bit stumped. Let's go with put me in for number 1.
Number 1.
Yeah, locking it in. 500.
Bachelor, Detroit's most eligible bachelor.
Yeah.
I am gonna go. You know what? I'm gonna go with football in high school because I know he loves baseball.
Oh.
Yeah.
The background is a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what it was. You never played football?
I never played football.
Never played football. Okay,
No.
let's hear about The Bachelor.
So yeah, this is in 2001.
Yeah.
Back when there was these things called newspapers. That's when they cut down trees and they put pictures and words on them. It was crazy how that worked back in the day. Yeah, and I was, my mother saw this thing looking for named Detroit's most eligible bachelor, so she sent in a bio on her wonderful son. And by the way, there were still a lot of people in Detroit in 2000, just so we're clear. And so yeah, I got named one of Detroit's most eligible bachelors. And then about 4 years ago, I got an opportunity to go speak at the University of South Africa on entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And part of that process and getting down there and working with people in the community was a guy, Brian Daniels, who I met at a baseball game of all things, said, hey, why don't we, reach out to someone I know who's doing missionary work in Zambia. And he does a lot of work with the youth there. Maybe we can do something with him. And his name is Chris McCurdy. And Chris invited us to come down there and bring the sport of baseball to Zambia because people in that country had never even played it before. And Chris discovered that because as a missionary from the United States, he and his missionary friends were throwing the ball around one day at the soccer field. And these kids came up to him like, what is that? So there's an image of me carrying a 6-foot duffel bag through Dubai of baseball gear.
Oh my goodness.
Dragging it through because this thing weighed like 50, 60 pounds and it was all like loose items and people. I play the Detroit MSBL, the men's senior baseball league, and a bunch of my compadres donated equipment. And so I'm dragging this through Dubai, trying to catch connecting flights. And I almost missed the flight because I'm carrying baseball gear to these kids. You talk about the impact of going to the Hustle 2.0. The flip of that is to teach kids the sport of baseball that they have never seen and to talk with them about opportunities that they've never even thought about through the sport was just so incredible. And these kids were literally no shoes, living in these tiny little huts, but they came out 2 days in a row to learn the sport, and it changed me forever.
Wow.
I saw your photographs because we're actually in the same focus group, forum group at a conclave that we go to in Boston every year. And Todd was sharing us these photographs of all these kids with the bats and the balls and it was incredible. Yeah, amazing. Well,
and I found too that when I went to Zambia, because of the shift in the equator, I could actually throw harder and hit the ball further. So I'll go play ball in Zambia too. And it was so interesting to learn about the community and about the cultures and I didn't travel. I know you guys are big travelers. I didn't travel for many years, so that for me opened up my mind to different people and different cultures. And what I found, and I don't know if you've experienced this, was my
Mm.
level of acceptance of my fellow human beings through the gift of travel actually increased.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know travel is the biggest gift we can give ourselves and our families, and just to understand the rest of our world. Because these days, we're on our phones and we see things, and we get kind of polarized by what we see. But if we actually go and experience it firsthand, opens up our whole opens up our whole world. It's incredible, and we're Todd and I are really fortunate. We've been in this conclave for many years, and what we did during COVID is we started something called the Three CEOs, where myself, Todd, and Andy Biting, another classmate, we were doing online seminars for the Entrepreneurs Organization of various chapters around the world, just sharing our lessons from the edge, and which was it's been a whole lot of fun, and it's been really interesting. It's been really interesting because there's a lot of stuff that we've experienced and wisdom that we've gained from trials and errors. And when you're talking to a group of people, and then you have somebody send you a message directly after, said, I was brought to tears by that certain story. I just thought it was a story. It's just something that happened in my life, and have it affect somebody so dramatically, and have a little light bulb. And I learned this from Todd. The reason Todd does writes his books and does his talks and does his coaching is because when he said, he told me this, he said, or you told me this, when that light bulb goes off in somebody's head, that aha moment is what makes it all worthwhile. And
Yeah.
that is right. Yeah.
I was actually researching why, because it's a spike of dopamine. Talking about, we were talking earlier about jumping in the cold water. It's literally a spike of dopamine. And, I use a coach. I use Dr. Danny Friedland out of San Diego.
Yeah.
I coach, 15 CEOs from around the globe right now. And in that process, I was curious about, why am I getting such joy in a sense of success to significance and purpose and passion and being of service to others. And we're talking through the brain chemistry around that. And it's very much that when we're being of mutual benefit to another person, and they have that light bulb moment, and then they express gratitude and appreciation for that experience. It's like raising kids. It's like teaching baseball to kids in Zambia. But it's not like really being on the Inc. 5000 list or the bestseller list or any of that stuff. It's about other people.
Yeah.
It's that joy we receive from them. And it's my new addiction. I love it. I can't it's amazing.
So that's one of the reasons you wrote your new book called From Suck to Success, right? It's interesting, and it helps people, figure out, that mindset, so we can design, kind of the ultimate life. Right? Is that right?
Yeah, very much
that's
so.
what brought that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first 4 chapters are all about mindset, and it's learning, it's figuring out where your mindset is at, why you have what you have, recognizing that maybe it doesn't work for you. That was at least my journey. Then pivoting into what I call ATV: authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Then how do you realize what's not working? You realize maybe where you want to go. Well, how do we then stage ourselves to mentally be prepared for the ups and downs of it all? And I go into a chapter of setting an intention, not an expectation.
Yeah.
Simply put, an expectation from a brain science perspective is either win or lose. You either hit the expectation or you didn't. Where we have intentional mindset around it, then we are actually literally using a different part of our brain, versus in an intentional mindset, we're using the front cerebral cortex. Using an expectation mindset, we're actually more in a reptilian part of our brain. So pivoting people there. And then the 4th chapter then lays out an active learning cycle on how to do that and maintain it. And then the final 4 chapters of the book are the taking action, the people section, leadership, and then the part where Nigel generously contributed was the designing your ultimate life, so you can have a life by design. Because I love the fact that, and I'm so glad you got value out of the light bulb moments. But when I always think of the doorknob effect and how you talk about that in your book and in your appearances on going to the office and realizing that walking into what do you call it, the bee's nest, the beehive of all of that, and someone wanting something from you. When people want so much from us, there's a part of our brains that do like that. But then also we pivot into like, okay, imposter syndrome comes out. I can't be all things to all people all the time on every topic. It just isn't going to happen. So what do we do with that? So again, I appreciate your generous contribution to kind of close the book out and what you've done in creating your life by design.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thanks, man. Dev, you got a question?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I'll ask you a little bit about. So I know you said, you ditch your comfort zone. Grow through authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability. So what did you mean by that? Can you shed a little light on that?
Sure. So I found when I was $600,000 in debt and was going to lose my business,
Yeah.
I hid. I put a lot of masks on. I put a lot of walls up between me and my team. And in that process, I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being transparent. I wasn't being vulnerable. I was suffering in silence. I hid behind things because I thought to be a great leader, to be a great CEO, I had to be a rugged individual. Well, when we pivot into authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability, we were able to communicate with people in a very authentic way. And Nigel mentioned the 3 CEOs, virtual speaking tour we did. That's all we did was speak from authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability. Here's what it's like to stand on the edge of bankruptcy. Here's what it's like to stand on the edge of almost losing everything. And so many people get wrapped up in putting out, through social media and other channels, this facade, this imagery. Whereas when we're authentic, transparent, and vulnerable, people literally receive us differently. It's kind of like when you meet people, like, oh, that person's a BS, or like there's something they say in the way they say it that it resonates with us, versus when you meet the Nigel Bennett's or the Lynn Twists of the world, who just come across with such warmth and such genuineness, even if they don't have all the answers or they don't know. It's their humanness comes out. And I always say this to my clients who are trying to sell and grow their businesses. If you're able to be authentic, transparent, and vulnerable in your sales process, authentic, transparent, and vulnerable in your communication process with your internal teams and your external world, so many more things are going to happen, because people make decisions based on emotions first and logic second.
Right. Well, and I know that, you talk about ditching your comfort zone. And it's that tricky, uncomfortable spot, right? But I know that for myself, I get more done when I'm outside of my comfort zone, when I step into it. It's taken a long, long time to figure that out, because I would rather pull back and hide and, lock myself away and not step through, like you said, the doorknob, and step into the office. I'd rather go home. But we had a really good speaker at our class in Boston a few years ago. And she said that our brains rewire every time we step out of our comfort zone into that space. And what happens is we step out of our comfort zone, we step into that space, we get that dopamine hit, and we realize when we come out the other side that, hey, it wasn't so bad. I actually feel really good. I'm glad that I pushed myself to do that. And your brain rewires, and it actually gets easier and easier to do over time. And I know when Devin's an actor, and I remember when you were going for some of your very, very first auditions, driving downtown, you had an audition, you're trying to remember your lines, you were freaking out in the car, and you're almost vomiting, almost sick. I mean, I was a soccer goalie. I used to vomit almost before every soccer match, right? I was so nervous. And Devin had and I remember I was chatting with Devin. I said, Dev, it'll be okay. This happens to me. You're going to go. It's going to be tough, but I guarantee an hour after your audition, you're going to come out of there. You're going to be bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
I wait for him outside. I pick him up, drive back. Guess what? He's bouncing off the walls. And he's just like, that wasn't, and then it becomes this pattern. Your brain realizes that, hey, you know what? I'm going to be okay if I get on stage. I personally was terrified of public speaking. The number one thing is it's probably the number one thing for many people is public speaking. Hated it. Never stuck up my hand once to answer a question in class in high school, ever. Zero. Mm-hmm. And then I got challenged to do public speaking, and I've been doing a lot more. And now I come out of there and I'm bouncing around for 3-4 hours afterwards because I feel so good. But my brain's starting to know that. So just like you're saying, it's like that, that stepping, past that comfort zone. And that's where the good stuff happens. That's the sweet spot.
Right? Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, and I think of someone like Devin, who's got to go in and audition.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of a more
Yep.
vulnerable place to be in, to then from casting director or whomever's in that space. But I love watching the generative questions that are asked in these long format interview shows. Sam Jones used to have one on Direct TV where he would sit with actors and talk with them about the craft of acting and the craft of prep. And it's the actors who didn't treat the audition as an expectation. I either get it or I don't. And if I don't, I suck. It's that elevator. Like if I'm working a lot, I must be awesome. Well, if I'm not working a lot, I must suck. How do we not take that elevator ride? And they talked often, and I don't know if Devin finds this to be true or not, but whereas, I went in there, I did my best, I didn't get it, but here's what I learned. Because if we're learning, we actually remove failure from the equation. If we're learning and growing, we take failure out of our process and you get a little bit better and a little bit better. Think about it like this. If you get 1% better every week over a year, within a year, and I'm going to say we're going to take 2 weeks off to go and mess around and go on vacation, not grow, we're going to be 50% better within a year. And as an actor who's putting themselves out there and going in and waiting for that external approval from someone versus, you know what, I went in there, I gave it my best, and I didn't get it, and that's okay because I am better. I'm now better by pushing through and leaning into that uncomfortable versus pulling back and not engaging.
For sure. No, that's absolutely true. Yeah, it takes like you're saying, being vulnerable, going out there, putting your all into something, and then even if you get rejected, it's of course you've learned something. Because when you get the okay, you're good, we're now hiring you, you go, okay, great, so I was perfect. I don't have to learn anything because I was great. I learned this from boxing for many years. You go into the ring, and if you win, or you're sparring or whatever, or you go into like a round robin match, you win a match. Okay, great, that's perfect. Now you think you're the best. But as soon as you lose, you get punched in the face a bunch, you're like, okay, I don't want to get punched in the face like that anymore. Now I'm going to have to learn something. Now I'm going to shift. Now I'm going to have to grow. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's just with lots of things in life for me. As soon as you get down or you get knocked down, it's all about getting back up or picking yourself back up and keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so courageous. I mean, I think to whether you're an entrepreneur and you're putting, 8 out of 10 businesses fail.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that. And then, you get into an EO sized business, only 4.3% of all businesses in the United States anyways qualify to be an EO. So less than 5%.
Wow.
And then how many, take it to acting, how many working actors are there who make a living? And let's say a living's $50,000 US. I don't even know what a living is considered. I mean, it's such a small fraction. The flip of that is, what if you didn't try? What if you're 60 years old saying, I wish I woulda, coulda, shoulda, woulda, versus I tried and it didn't work? Or, I love these, I had a friend of mine in high school. He goes to college. He goes to New York City because he wants to become an actor. And I'm at university here. I'm like, I want to come hang out in New York. He's like, yeah, you're welcome to come stay in my 1-bedroom apartment and sleep on my floor, but I don't have time to go out and party with you in New York City. I'm like, why not? He's like, I'm studying to have a craft and a career. I said, oh, come on, you're making bank. He's this waiter, super personable, really gregarious individual. I was like, dude, I missed paying my rent last month because I had to pay for acting classes. And I had to pay for acting classes because it's not an expense, but an investment in me. And it's those people who lifelong learn and they polish and create a craft. Those are the ones that I argue, like you guys who've had careers as entrepreneurs or have a career in the tough space of acting where everybody thinks, well, I just fall out of bed and they love me and my parents loved me. I got plenty of feedback on what a cute kid I was. Everybody's going to hire me. It doesn't work that way. No, it's the bruises and the skinned knees and the reinvestment you put into yourselves. I think that will propel you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's a big mark on when you just relax, things will also happen. It's like if you try to push it too hard, and it's like, of course, push it and get and hone your craft and be good at what you do. But it's that thing of not taking it too personally. Step back and be like, you know what, it is okay. Because if you go into that room with the mindset of it is okay, I'm here for a learning curve. I'm here to show you what I got, but I'm also here to not 100% get the job. That's when you get the jobs. You just take it easy, calm down, know you're enough, and know you're good at what you do.
Yeah, so it reminds me of a story when I was, $600,000 in debt. I used to try to muscle my way through something.
Yeah.
And my coach goes, he's like, hey, all right, so you got into this debt by muscling your way into it, right? You're shooting for a number, you're taking on bad deals and all the nonsense that I did. And, I'm very transparent in the book and how I got so far into debt. He's like, what if you're intentional about getting out of debt, but you don't necessarily know exactly how it's going to happen? So you're going to show up every day. You're going to try a bunch of different things. You're going to keep what works and get rid of every step over and over. And you teach to your staff. So I created this process to hire people called Hire for DNA, Not for Resume, because I didn't want a bunch of, narrow-minded, stuck thinking people to come and say, well, this is the only way to do it. And like to your point, Devin, it's like, if you go in and you give an audition with the best of intentions, and they say, well, hey, can we pivot you and can you do it this way? Well, I only prepared this way, so I can't do it that way. I can't.
Yes.
It's you got to be flexible. And if you take, again, what I love about the creative arts is, especially my favorite form is improv, where we never tell our partner no. We always say yes. I mean, who doesn't want to live in a world where all people do is say yes to you?
Very true. That's yeah.
So we're talking about this is really cool because you also talk about fail forward leadership, right? So this is a perfect dovetail into that. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So fail forward leadership for me came out of the mindset of imposter syndrome on my itty bitty shitty committee.
Yeah.
Where I, every time I failed, which happened to get $600,000 in debt, you don't just fail once. You don't just fail twice. You fail a bunch. So it was kind of a layering effect, and it stacked up for me. And all I did was tell myself how much I sucked. Well, that's why I got 11 on the cover of the book. That's why it's From Suck to Success, because it was my internal dialogue. And I had to realize that, and primarily, I learned a little bit from my first coach, Greg, but really doubled down on this in my work with Danny around, that failing forward, as long as you're learning and as long as you're striving and as long as you're growing, you've really not failed. Right. And for me, it was a really hard construct, coming from a competitive sports background, there where somebody does win and somebody does lose. I even took it to how I still play, as I still play baseball. The reality is in baseball, you're a success if you fail 7 out of 10 times as a hitter. You hit 300 and you're considered a good hitter.
Right.
That's how it works. Right. But once I inversed and reversed that, and then I'm talking to so I have a baseball hitting coach, believe it or not, at 52 years old, because I want to get better because I got issues and I just got to keep learning. And I had a game and he goes, how did you play? I said, I went 0 for 3. Well, how did you hit the ball? It's called squaring it up. That's where you hit the ball in the perfect spot of the bat as hard as you possibly can.
Yes. Right.
And I got out 3 times doing that. And I was furious. He's like, I don't know what you're so upset about, because you did the very best you could. There's an opponent on the other side from the pitcher and the defense who wants to beat you. They're here to prevent you from doing what you want to do.
Yes.
And we did a real deep dive on the inner mindset of what failure meant. He goes, how about you take away the idea of getting a hit off the table? Like, you just assume you're never going to get another hit again. But what if you square up the ball 5 out of 10 times? I said, okay. And say the defense catches it all those times. It's called the law of averages. One day you're not going to square it up. You're going to hit it off the end of the bat, and it's going to flare into right field, and it's going to be a hit. Or you're going to really cue it. It's going to go right over the first baseman's head. The worst kid's in right field. He hustles over there. All of a sudden you get a triple because he can't get over there quick enough. Yeah. It all evens out, but it's the mindset you approach it with. And that changed everything for me. So I use it a lot with my coaching clients, where like, I did this presentation, we didn't get the deal. Okay, I can understand that it would be disappointing, but it doesn't mean you failed. What did you learn from it, and what are you going to take differently going forward? And it's that pivot to learn from it. Like we talked about with Devin and his acting, he may go in and interview for or audition for a role, but he's going to make, if he does it in a certain way, I'm going to guess, this is just my, my layman's experience looking at the acting world outside in, is that he's going to make an impression on that casting director. And he may not be a great fit for a certain role, but he's going to make an impression. And that casting director, who does have the control, does have some power, may bring him back in for a different audition for something he never even knew about. But if he goes into it and he pouts and he has a hissy fit and he's throwing things, and I can't believe I didn't get this role, well, that's also going to make an impression. And he probably isn't going to get invited back too. So we don't control, like with COVID. COVID shut down 6 stages and 3 different countries for me to go speak from. Shuts it all down. So what do? I pivoted into working with you and Andy, become the 3 CEOs, because COVID happened for me, not to me. Exactly. So we eliminate failure, and we are able to fail forward through it. If we realize that everything happens for us, not to us. You're in a car accident, the car hits you. That happened for you, not to you, because now you make different decisions off of that. It's just that mindset shift that I've seen be transformative for many people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's completely correct.
And it's interesting. It's again, it goes back to, you go all the way back to Darwin and whatnot, where it's that adaptation. It's those that can adapt and can adapt the quickest to COVID and whatever it is, failing after that, learning from it and then adapting, are the ones that thrive. It's the ones that can't see it and don't, that, we get stuck and we can't move forward. Right. So that's really, really cool. So you're in your coaching, going back to your coaching. So, you're coaching, this is kind of coaching week. We've had a lot of coaches on our show here the past week or so. So this is coaching week. So I really like what you do with your coaching, and as opposed to telling people what to do, you share your stories. You're a big storyteller, right? And I totally agree with that. That's actually how I wrote my book. It was all stories about
Sure.
what happens in life, as opposed to saying you need to do, in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to do A, B, C, and D. So yeah, you're a big story guy, right? So why is that so important to you and to me for sharing?
Yeah. So for me as a coach, my job is to be the guide over someone else's hero's journey. So going back to the movies, right? I'm Gandalf to your Frodo. You're going to get through the Shire above you. I want to make sure you don't go off the cliff or get taken out by the orcs or whatever he's going to do. But I guide them, and I'm able to guide them because it's their story. It's not my story. We've done our stories. I got offered a CEO job the other day. I'm like, no, I'm good. Yeah. I'm happy doing what I'm doing because I'm able to go in and make a greater impact, leave a bigger legacy on this planet by being of service to many people versus running one business. Right. Because I approach everything with massive curiosity. Sure. My job is to be a really good question asker. And in that art of asking questions and actively listening, then I can help them tell their story. And I can augment their story with some of my stories or stories from other people. And then when I get massively curious, and we peel away the layers, then we get to the root. And at the root is where the transformation takes place versus dealing with the symptoms. And then when we get to the root, I hold them massively accountable to whatever they say they want. So I know you have a great story about your coach and Kevin, and how ultimately, would you call it your constellation or your
the asteroid belt?
The asteroid belt, right? So
I
remember when you told the story about you had this one thing that you said, hey, I want to go travel the world. I want to take a year off, and that wasn't Kevin's story. That was your story. What Kevin did as a great coach is he held you accountable to what you said you wanted. The brilliance of you saying what you want is you have total control as a client of mine to change your story anytime you want. You want to go from a comedy romance to an action movie? Cool. We can totally do that. I come in and I'm at my best service to my clients when they aren't able to articulate why their activity is in direct opposition to what they say they want.
Yes.
So let's see, Nigel, you want to go see the world, but you just bought 2 more companies and you're working 90 hours a week.
Exactly.
How is that in alignment with what you said you want? And I just asked the question. Because if I go in there with an assumption mindset, one, I'm going to irritate my client because I'm not serving them. I'm serving ego and pride for me because look at how smart I am. I cracked the code before ever asking you a question. And 2, I'm not going to help you have those light bulb moments, which is going back to why I do all this. So I'm going to not serve you, which doesn't serve me, to improve your life. So let's just be massively curious and help someone figure out. I did this thing the other day in Texas where someone had been dealing with an issue for several years. In 45 minutes, we got them unstuck around an issue they've been suffering with for 8 years.
Yeah.
Super rewarding. But if I just taken the person at their surface presentation topic and not peeled away the layers, we would have given them, like you talked about, well, here's the 10 ways to grow your business. Anybody can go get a pamphlet for that. I mean, let's unpeel the human being who's stuck. Let's unpeel and deal with the imposter syndrome, the itty bitty shitty committee, and all things holding them back to help them grow into something of pure greatness that is greatness to them as they define it for self.
Yeah. I really noticed when I was working with my coach, Kevin Lawrence, that, we drew out like a 1-page plan, and we created basically an asteroid belt and all these things that we had to zap and get them out of the way so we could move through to the next thing. But that page is like you said, it's your life by design. Here's a page, design what exactly you want your life to be. And that's what you want. We're going to lock that in stone. And, you've got it. That's your dream. Everything is on that page. But over time, you're drifting over here. And he would just smack me back. And you go, Nigel, this is what you said you wanted to do. Not this over here. Like, this is your dream. So he would hold me accountable, just like you're saying.
Well,
and over time, we're able to move through all the chaff and the asteroids and get to what my actual dream was.
Well, it's crazy because I'll find, like, Kevin's like, I know he served you well. We've talked offline about that.
Right.
What I often have to help people figure out is why they don't think they're really truly worthy of what they want.
Yes.
Why am I not good enough to have what I want?
Yes.
And once we crack that code, it's, as you know, I know the word transformational gets overused a lot, but like I talk about in my book, it's extraordinary, because an extraordinary experience for all three of us is going to be three different experiences. As long as we own it and we feel we've done the work to get there, it's truly amazing stuff, versus the person who's like, I wish I woulda, coulda, shoulda, but they're the one holding themselves back. Let's peel that away. Let's free you up to get into your zone of genius, to create the great life that you want.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Deb, do you have a question?
Yeah. No, I got one for you. So let's hypothetically speaking, you can go back to a 20-year-old version of yourself. What are the number one key point of wisdom that you've acquired over the years that you would share with that young baseball stud?
Well, one, I was not a baseball stud, but I appreciate your retelling of history. I have no problem as a master thespian. If you want to retell my story, I'm really good with that. So it's interesting. I love the question. As I was thinking about it, it dawned on me. I wrote this book for two people. I wrote it for my son, who's 30.
Yes.
So he could go back and look at what our lives were like. Because I'm sure he's adjusted for self-preservation purposes sometimes what it was like to be my kid. But two, I started my first company when I was 27.
Yeah.
And I wrote the book as if I was mentoring or coaching the 27-year-old me. So when I think back to being, 20, I think the first thing I would tell myself is failure is just a construct that I tell myself, that failure doesn't really exist in our world, and that there is no straight line from north to south for success. It's always a looping, corkscrewing, that it's always pivoting and shifting. As it shape shifts, we have to shape shift with it, versus trying, like you talked about, muscling our way through it. So, and then third, go back to the imposter syndrome. The itty bitty shitty committee does not serve me well. And I use this analogy a lot with my clients. Imagine you have a sports car and your life is that sports car. You got the driver's side and the passenger side. When the imposter syndrome is in the driver's seat, it controls the decisions we make. If we just switch seats with it, we sit in the driver's side. We control our destiny. Now, the imposter syndrome sits next to us. And at one point, the imposter syndrome was there to protect us. So one version, or one part of the imposter syndrome from childhood is, it's the part of our brain that says, don't put your finger in the light socket. It's not a good idea. It's there to protect us. Well, eventually that we mature, hopefully gain some wisdom and realize that, putting our finger in the light socket is not a good idea. But we have to recognize that the imposter syndrome is always going to be there. What I used to think the 20-year-old me was, one, imposter syndrome was just, that's just a reality. I had no control over it. So I was a victim to it, or a martyr suffering from it. Now I realize I do have power over that. Secondly, realizing that it's always going to kind of be there in some volume, either a light whisper or screaming at me, depending upon the topic. And realize that that's normal. There's not, like, I'm not defective or broken, that I can't eliminate it, that nobody can really eliminate it. So again, dealing with recognize the imposter syndrome is something I can control. Realizing that I have, the ability to build the life of design I want. I wish I would have known that when I was 20.
Wow. Right. Wow, man. Yeah. The imposter syndrome. I know we've talked about this before. That's one that's, really hit me. I know, meeting you the first time, driving up, at MIT up to the Endicott House. I'm this entrepreneur from the West Coast, and, dyslexic, ADD, everything. And I drive up there and I'm like, I don't belong with all these smart people. This is a class of entrepreneur geniuses, and I'm an imposter. I don't belong here. And then, over time, sharing, you realize that, okay, yeah, but it's that that just knocks us back so much in life. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for this. I don't belong here. For Devin, I'm not good enough to be, in this show or with these other incredible actors. But it's all our mind. It's just all in our mind. So yeah, no, thanks for that, Todd.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I guess I think we're gonna wrap her up on this little bit here. I think that was really good.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
super. You guys are a blast. I'm so glad.
Anything else? Anything else you want to? Any little nugget? Any other nugget? You got great nuggets, like always, great little nuggets.
Well, I want to appreciate you guys so much for having me on. So one of the main reasons I wrote the book is to get the message out to people. So anybody who goes to my website extraordinaryadvisors.com can get the first chapter for free. Now it's not Nigel's chapter, that's chapter 8. So to get the Nige experience, you got to buy the whole book. But as a primer and a teaser, we'll give you the first chapter for free. So I'd encourage anybody who's curious about it, because in the first part, we really talk about almost everything we've kind of covered here today. The imposter syndrome, the itty bitty shitty committee. What do you really want? Dealing with your brutal realities of COVID and how to pivot out of that. So, I'd love to give that to your audience. If they're interested, please check it out at extraordinaryadvisors.com.
Yeah.
And the book is From Suck to Success. And I'm happy to give you the free chapter.
Yeah. I just love it. I love what, our guests, our guests on this show here. You've written books, our good friend, David Ash, what all these books are, which is the wisdom that we've all accumulated, all the knocks and the smacks and the rising from the ashes over years and years and years and years. And they're all in these incredible books. And I really honestly believe, and I've said this a million times, I honestly believe, not that Todd's old, but I'm getting older. I'm 59 tomorrow. I think it is on St. Patty's Day.
Yeah.
But I really honestly believe it's our duty to give back to the younger generations, whatever we've learned, good, bad, indifferent, the wisdom. And that's what's happening. And I really believe that it's a great responsibility that we do, the older generations do, to pass the wisdom down to the younger generations, just like in the old days when, it's to sit around the fire and share the story and the wisdom from the elders. I'm an elder now. I'm not going to say anything about you. I'm an elder now, and I think that's our responsibility. And I really thank you, Todd, for putting this book. This is you've written a bunch of books, but this is super cool. And thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Nigel, Devin, thank you guys so much for having me on the show. You could have a lot of guests and a lot of different people. The fact that you took the time to talk about the stuff we've talked about today, talk about our experiences together, and talk about my latest project is super, super rewarding. So I want to express much gratitude and appreciation to the two of you.
Yeah, thanks, Todd.
Thank you for being on the show. Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you want to wrap it, Dev?
Yeah. If you want to learn anything more about Todd, we'll put the link in the description. Definitely check out that book, From Suck to Success. And that is all for today. Thank you all for checking in.
Thank you.